Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to From the Ashes, a podcast where every episode ignites hope and healing. I'm your host, Valerie Huang Beck, and I'm on a mission to help you embrace your unique potential and become the vibrant visionary you knew you were meant to be.
And the fire in the darkest night, the phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the
All right,
flame
everyone,
that
welcome back to
ignites
From the
your
Ashes.
heart.
So today I have a very special guest. Her name is Elizabeth Stauder, and she's a somatic transformation coach and neuroplasticity expert who helps people heal from trauma, illness, and burnout by combining the quantum with the ancestral in restoring wholeness for mind, body, spirit healing. A huge mouthful, and I really want to dig into what all of that means. I'll let her explain in a second. So she blends neuroscience with what she refers to as soul retrieval, another term I'd love to dig into, to help others reclaim their wholeness in a way that's deeply embodied and lasting. So Elizabeth has been quite the rocky road herself, and she has survived a near-death experience from a vaccine injury that left her navigating months of chronic illness and disability, and she had to rebuild her body, her nervous system, and her sense of self from the ground up. She's been through a whole lot, and now she's taking all of that and putting it into the foundation of her work and how she helps the world. So now she has her online collective called the Body and Soul Sanctuary, where she teaches people what she calls somatic alchemy. So, yes, we have a powerhouse in the room. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love hearing all your enthusiasm, the words I used.
No, it's great. And real excited to dig into the conversation because you always have great and deep insight, not only into just healing, but understanding what it means to live.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah. And we vibe on a level that I don't get to experience a lot of the time. So I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. It's really delightful to be here, and I just wanna say I love the healing and the living, like, together that you just put in that sentence, like, to me, at this point, they're the same thing.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it is the life journey, right?
Mm.
So, let's get into your From the Ashes story, and I know that having talked to so many people, like, there is really no one, like, rock bottom per se, there's always, like, something that leads up to it, so I'll let you choose the starting point, and then we'll go from there. Yeah.
That's dangerous when you're talking to someone who works in the quantum and the
I
ancestral. Like,
Well,
"Well,
actually,
how many
let's
generations do you want to go back?"
okay, I'll pick that. Since it's so glaring to me, the one that really kind of started you off on this journey is that vaccine injury. So
Mhm.
let's start from there.
Yeah. It's like, what level should I answer the question? But I think, what's coming to mind in this moment, it's so funny, my voice is cracking, and that started about an hour ago, and it doesn't happen very often. And this morning, I just actually released stones from my liver for the first time.
Oh,
So, and
intentionally?
intentionally.
Okay,
And my acupuncturist yesterday told me that the gallbladder holds ancestral patterns.
okay.
So and I had a dream last night about my family. So, what's kind of coming to me to say about the vaccine injury is that I could talk about the physical experience itself, which was extremely painful and scary. Essentially, like it triggered a neurodegenerative disease pretty immediately, an autoimmune response that was like very similar to anaphylaxis, but almost like I don't know how else to describe it, like neurological anaphylaxis, because it was through all the nerves, and I didn't actually need to get an EpiPen or anything, but it was, like, similar feeling in my body all around. But, like, the choice to get the vaccine was very interesting because it followed a dream of, like, not having a voice. So I'm, like, just going with the fact that my voice is like, "Talk about that part of it today." Like, in the middle of COVID and everybody having all of these different opinions, I dreamed that I had something to say to try to make it like, all of the, like, verbal warfare stop, but it wouldn't come out of my throat. It was, like, stuck in the dream, and I literally had people, like, in my own household, in my own, like,
Mhm.
intimates that were on opposite sides of the sort of battleground of opinions about the vaccine and everything that went with it. In the midst of all that, my father actually died in the COVID ward, and he was on the verge of retiring and was really healthy, but had an underlying inflammatory condition that just completely ballooned as soon as he got COVID. And
Okay.
he was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and I think about half that time on the ventilator in a coma, and then he was passed very suddenly and shockingly. And I went to get the vaccine the day afterwards, not in response to him dying. I didn't know he was gonna die that day. That was when my appointment happened to be. So I actually also went in the middle of this, like, my body still processing his spirit literally being, like, out of his body and crossing the veil at the same time that I took the vaccine, and so there's a lot there. There's a lot there, but we'll just say that maybe to answer your question about how I recovered, like, it required not only months and months of, like, deep regenerative body practices and nutrition and things to, like, reverse the toxicity that was, like, getting my organs on the verge of organ failure, but also a lot of deep spirit realm traversing and ancestral work and, like, also work around my with my father and his spirit. So it was all very tied together because all these things happened at the same moment, and I can't remember what the third part of your question was, but
Oh, it's okay.
at the beginning.
This is just a process of unpacking, and we
Yeah.
can take it as slow or fast, and we can go in as
Okay.
many meandering roads as we would like, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so all is well. I didn't know that your father had passed from COVID. That's yeah. And then, like, you talk about all of these the warring voices. I definitely felt that during the pandemic as well. It's like a lot there was just, like, a lot of irrational fear going around, and it had real consequences in both directions. I wanna hear how you saw all that was happening, how you're processing that in the moment. Like, did you have more of, like, an emotional reaction, or, were there things that were just, like, what was going on through your head as all of this was happening?
Yeah, I know. It's so interesting because I still remember my brothers and I had like this online forum where we were posting updates for the community about my dad during a process, which we didn't know whether it was going to be a recovery or a death process, but we were just in it, because he had quite a wide community. And so we were, taking time, like we were taking shifts. Each of us would take shifts like on call with the hospital and also like on sharing with the community what was going on with him. And I still remember like, you know, there was a lot of mixed feelings for me, but I remember being really rooted in my somatic and nervous system awareness that I had cultivated because I even remember like just being in this profound moment of just sharing one of those updates, typing it out, like feeling the shock, I guess would be the emotion like in the field and like being able to tune into my physical body though and like still feel my breath moving in and out, feel my like hips on the chair and feel this feeling of like something in me was fundamentally okay and in balance despite, like, the wildness of what was going on, and I still remember that moment because it was, like, the last moment of that before all of like, with the onset of the vaccine, the capacity for that took a few years to come back, but I remember that because in my work, it's, like, part of what we're doing is restitching, like, where something kind of like, where the fabric got torn, so to speak, and I think part of why that was really important for me too was because in healing all of it, like, I had to separate out the parts because they were so close together, like, what's the vaccine? What's grief? Like, what's also like, confusion of just, like, an ending of a relationship too was happening at the same time, like, a lot of things were falling away. Huge, huge things were falling away all at the same time. The process of death itself, like, of my body my father leaving his body and going to the spirit realm was actually a peaceful experience for me,
Mm,
to answer your question of what was going through, how I was feeling. There was something about receiving the vaccine that felt in a way all opposite to that, and also the way that that warring energy between people felt opposite to that. Like it felt somehow the antithesis to like a healthy relationship with death and crossing, if that makes sense. And I couldn't have necessarily named that in the moment, but I was deeply feeling the clash of all of that in my body and my emotions.
Let's backtrack a little bit. Have you always been a healer? Or did
Yeah.
you have an alternate path before you found that?
I've always been a healer, but I've never been out of the closet. Like, I think it took a long time to come out of the closet. So I would apply my sensitivity in other ways, like through teaching children for schooling and through writing and creative pursuits and through just communing with the natural world and doing rituals and lots of those kinds of things. It took me a long time to come out of the closet and say, like, this is my identity, like, in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were a teacher beforehand.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. Among
Oh,
other things, also an interpreter.
okay.
I interpreted for, like, Latino patients at the hospital,
Okay.
and students at the school, yeah, for their families.
All right. So you have quite the methodology, and there are certain terms that you use for your methods that probably people don't aren't really familiar with. I want to allow you to express your process in the way that resonates with you. So I'll start with the how did you come to what is quantum, right? What is combining quantum and ancestral, and what does that mean for you? How did you find that?
I mean, for me, at this point, they're all the same, but I use the terms, I think, to help other people braid the the deeply, like, felt and known indigenous wisdom that I believe we all carry in our DNA with some of the new research that's coming out in science that is actually kind of showing in more left brain ways the accuracy of the things that our right brain already knows. So the neuroplasticity part, which is powerful and really shows through it actually like shows the science of it is possible for someone to experience something that might happen like in a very shamanic or animist kind of way where they like have a dream, for example, and something in their life changes because of a communion that they've had with their psyche in some way, you could say. Yeah, I just think it's so powerful, especially even when you think about I like to sort of visualize and I'll often have my clients almost like imagine as we're doing the work, like as if by training our attention in certain directions, tending the inner tree inside of us, like if you think of like the nerves and like the big nerves and then the smaller nerves, almost like branches of like a tree, and you're like pruning some and you're fertilizing others. You're literally like shaping the way that that tree is experiencing life and then that tree is literally the thing that's taking signals in and out from what you might call your body into the world and every relationship out there. The quantum talks about the possibility to, essentially change change your timeline or change your life or change yourself, even your identity, right? And it doesn't and to be able to do that in ways that even can befuddle the left brain's thinking about linear time, right? And I think when you just go in there and think of time as just like strung across this great tree, and there's pieces that are maybe stuck or calcified because they haven't been given what they need to grow because they have trauma or something. If you give a little water or a little something, it's suddenly going to branch out in a direction that there wasn't something before, and it can literally feel like you're jumping time, so to speak, like as if something that was stuck like 20 years ago or even a couple generations in your family ago has now given something that it needed. The tree now changes, you now change, the whole field changes.
Okay, so I'm gonna feed that back to you because I talk a lot about how we can choke our own energies in certain aspects of our life because of conditioning or trauma and whatnot, where and this is my language, we have limiting beliefs from childhood because of something that happened where we don't allow ourselves a certain aspect of our energy to flow. So, for example, I know that I have issues with the flowing energy of joy.
Mm,
Like, that has to be something in my mind that has to be earned rather than is something that is just innately a part of who I am. And so because of that, it actually chokes that flow, and that affects all the other aspects of my life in ways that I don't really get to see until it becomes a problem,
yeah.
right? And so don't worry,
I'm just
I'm
feeling
working
so
on
much
it.
compassion about it. No, I know
Thank
you
you.
are, but that's just my natural response.
Yeah. But so I wanna tie it back because obviously you have used this framework and this ability to channel energy to heal you, and a lot there was just so much going on at the time. There has to have been, one, like, a deep equanimity and ability to zoom out, right?
Yes.
And then also being able to look at these things without so much of the partiality, having opinions about it, just being able to see what it is. So let's ground it in for our audience. I want you to describe, if you are willing to, just, you know, how that process was for you. What was going on in your body and your mind? And then how did you use your system to
Mm,
navigate that?
beautiful question. Thank you for asking. And you're accurate about that. How, I mean, I had to zoom out immensely. I was deeply in every single day in like the deepest existential questions. And I guess you could say I was faced with the task of integrating the healthy longing of the body to be alive and be healthy with the part of me that was completely already at home in the universe beyond a body. In order to survive, it was it honestly, it would have been easier to not. Like, it would have been easier to just be like, I would like to just fade out into that feels so much more peaceful because inside of my skin and bones, like, what was happening was basically a war zone of sensation, of inflammation, of swellingness, of tissues rigidifying, of not being able to breathe, like, even loss of motor capacity, like, all kinds of things. I think I had to first kind of give up any part of me that wanted to survive out of panic or fear, like, "I have to survive." I had to completely let that part of me, um, die. Um, and I had to come from this seat of my soul and be like, what's it gonna take to survive if that's what I'm meant to? And really, like, really listen, you know? And it wasn't clear. For a long time, there was this period where I felt like I was starting to listen from that soul, with that other part having died, and it was still lots of weeks of not knowing which way was I gonna go. Was I gonna die or not? But there was something that I understood that I was learning about listening. And in my training, we practice listening when we feel well in our body and in our nervous system so that when we feel really unwell, like when we have waves of whatever the trauma or dysregulation might be, we can still find a way to like listen from that place regardless of that. And this was relentless weeks and weeks of it. And so I just kind of was like, I just like strapped on my whatever, my soul's seatbelt, black belt, and just like, okay, I'm gonna listen, you know? And I still remember a moment, and this is like one of the only scenes I've written in the book that I'm working on about this at the moment, but because it was so simple, but it was so profound. I remember a moment where I was in the bath, and I remember it was the first time I had the capacity to actually like look at the wall and have it be something that was comforting to me because it was simple and it was not moving or vibrating or like a black, like that was a degree of it was like being in psychosis, I mean. And it was like just a wall and it was just the right color and I could touch it and it wasn't like playing tricks on me. So this kind of gets a little bit into the heart of the trauma because it was ultimately beneath a lot of it was like a feeling of betrayal or unreliability or unsafety. In this moment, the wall actually was safe and reliable. And I literally leaned on it and felt my body have its few seconds of like relaxing a niche. Like it was like this little tiny doorway, and to me the message was like even though there's a tiny breadcrumb in a storm, like just keep training your almost like that metaphor of like the house of demons and there's like a door of light at the end and just keep walking through the demons and like you'll get there. And once I started to sort of track those breadcrumbs, and at first it literally felt like climbing like up a rope and you have like no energy. You literally like if you let go you're gonna die and it would have been easier too, but like it took like just like so much effort. So much effort. And I needed, I think, to rewire my relationship with effort, that it could be
Yeah.
positive, if that makes sense.
Can
But
you say more about that?
oh,
Rewire?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about like the survival states of the nervous system, sometimes not everyone realizes that freeze is not the opposite of fight or flight. It's actually when fight or flight is so intense that like and you've lost the capacity to do that. And so it's kind of like fight or flight trapped inside of like a stillness. In a way you could say that's what was going on in my body was I was literally frozen, which is funny with the ancestral healing because my name I am named after the younger sister of my mom's mom who died by drowning in the ice when she was a child. So anyway, interesting backstory, but my body was completely like out of energy, completely drained, and yet inside my body was a freaking wildfire going on all the time. And so the trick you could say was to in little bits at a time like start to like free that energy out of my body. And so that meant actually letting myself feel the full intense force of not just emotions of fight or flight, so like rage and terror, sheer terror, but also like letting my body you could say one thing that freeze does, and a lot of us most people in our world today have this chronically, even if they're not sick, like to some degree, our nervous system and our body knows when we should leave a situation, flee,
Mhm.
or when we should have some confidence and confrontation or a boundary. But whenever we don't let our body have the boundary or walk away, fight or flee, like it doesn't go away. It gets like compressed inside us as this intense energy, right? When I say rewire my relationship with effort and I guess it also meant like taking away the part of me that thought badly of myself for all the ways that I wanted to run away and have boundaries and be pissed off about everything that wasn't really a reflection of my soul and that wasn't in alignment for me in my life. So, to actually learn to fall in love with my nervous system's panic and rage and be like, "Oh, this is wise." Like, it's really turned up because it's been so shoved down and I haven't known how to listen and I haven't known like, even going to get the vaccine was me listening to a voice that was not really my intuitive voice that thought it knew better for me, what was good for me than I did, and I
Okay.
listened. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I really love how you say to fall in love with panic and rage.
Yeah.
It's something I feel like recently, I've actually fallen a lot in love a lot more with my rage because I realized that I was silencing myself to make other people feel comfortable. That's a pattern, right? And it's a pattern of denying yourself. And it's actually something that I see in a lot of people. And it doesn't serve them because it creates a muted existence, and they don't even realize it.
That's a great word for it, a muted existence. Yeah.
Yeah. What did this what did that open up for you? What did that give you access to that you didn't have before?
Oh my gosh. It felt like a backlog, an archive of channeling, like, information guidance, like, just came, like, pouring through me when I let the lid off of that. Yeah, and I had a practice of, and I'll say it as a caveat that part of what happened as well is that, well, 2 things. As I listened to that inner voice and was able to parse it apart, even though it felt so tiny compared to all the noise, 1, it led me to find physical resources in the world that were actually supportive of reversing the injury. And most of those things were things that were ancestral and like, they were much more regenerative and not in the sick care system, but in the system of, like, undoing all of that. And the second thing that happened was I was able to, I mean, the only way I can really describe it is it felt as if I was just thrust into a shamanic, like, awakening, like an initiation of sorts where, like, every time that I would go into, I wouldn't like, a meditation, it would get when I say that, it just, like, even closing my eyes or even just like, being a little bit less in pain, like, getting in the bath was usually where I would do it with the salts, and that would kinda take the pain away enough for me to not just be in pain, and in that moment, I got first of all, I got a lot of visitations from what felt like energies that were helping me heal and had messages both for me to apply in the outer world, but also ways that I could start communicating with my symptoms. And I discovered that sometimes it was a matter of like needing a resource or a remedy. Sometimes it was a matter of needing to retrieve something more energetic or psychic that had gotten lost and that I needed to bring home to my body. And sometimes it was something that I had swallowed that was toxic, that was energetic or psychic, and that I needed to purge and I needed to move it out of my field so that I could have that energy flow again. And now it's so wild because I feel like I'm surrounded all of the time with, like, so many helpers. They're just, like, following me everywhere.
How does this relate to setting healthy boundaries?
Oh my gosh. I mean, in so many ways, even down to the science of, like, what happens on the cell membrane and the mitochondria and leaky gut and the tears in the fabric that we stitch together to get rid of the, well, to I wouldn't say get rid of the trauma, but to integrate the trauma so that it's a gift. What I've learned is that true unity consciousness and connection happens when our boundaries are intact. Quite the opposite of enmeshment. Like when we're fully sovereign and fully, and people use that word and I sometimes I think they're using it the way that I'm talking about, but sometimes people are using it almost like as a like a hyper independence and that's not at all what I'm talking about.
Right.
But there's a way that when we have healthy boundaries, they're not calcifications, like, in a way, like, rigidity is actually something that doesn't have a boundary that's trying to overcompensate, and it's been so bombarded that it just turns into rigidity. Healthy boundaries are soft and porous and fluffy and juicy and yummy, and they actually invite resonant connection. Um, and nothing that's really in support of us, like, in our empowerment, like, whether it's a physical thing or an energetic thing, um, would want to, like, move through a boundary without a kind of a recognition process and a process of honor, a mutual co-honoring and co-communing, a recognition of the divine and the respect in the other being. And so I think in a way the boundaries are like this our boundaries are like this thing that keeps us not only physically intact, like literally, right? Because if our physical tissue boundaries break down, like we get sick and die, but like from a spiritual and psychic perspective, it's what allows us to really commune in deeper and deeper experiences safely with the universe.
Okay. I would love for us to dig a little bit into that because I don't think a lot of people distinguish between the rigid boundary and the healthy, I don't wanna say fluid, but it's just like living one. And the way that I could
Yes.
see it in the body is like, let's say you have necrotic or like some autoimmune skin thing where, maybe like psoriasis. That's technically a boundary, but it's rigid, right? As opposed to like having a healthy skin boundary where it's like letting in all the good things and letting all the bad things out. Like it's actively discerning, whereas, with the psoriasis is actually just blocking.
You described it so perfectly right there. Active discernment
Uh-huh.
versus blockage. Those are very different, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you see this like I'm sure you work with this with your clients, right? Or even with yourself, like ho what is one way that people might have a too rigid boundary as opposed to one that's actually healthy?
Well, I think there's a lot in how you just use the term discernment there, right? Because a healthy boundary is is not one that is always fixed the same way in across all circumstances and all time. Like that to me is more of a blockage. It's like compartmentalized from because what we're experiencing is a flow. Right? Some moments I'm breathing in and some moments I'm breathing out. Some moments I'm having a certain experience. Some moments I'm feeling awake. Some moments I'm feeling asleep. Some moments I'm digesting my food. There's a movement to our life, right? And so a healthy boundary is tracking those movements like automatically, which our autonomic nervous system was designed to do. It's tracking those moments and responding appropriately in accordance with what's happening in every moment. A rigid, I wouldn't even call it a boundary, a block. It's kind of outside of that stream of time, like living experience. It's not present. It's just kind of like based on something that maybe happened or didn't happen at some point in the past. And so it kind of like it closed something or opened something that should be closed. It did something that was rigid and stayed that way. And it's not really able to sense what's happening right now anymore. It's still reacting to whatever happened before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanna ask another question that might be tough to answer, but it's gonna be an important one because I think a lot of people are gonna have it because this comes up every time. Because for some people, your recovery may seem like a miracle. And we talked previously about how health means to love life and how the decision is actually what reversed the disease. That is so it's profound, but it's also it can feel out of reach sometimes, right?
Totally.
So in your best way, can you describe like how the change transpired in your body first? And like why you think it was that decision or that choice that actually made the difference?
Yeah, I love this question. And I want to acknowledge too that it fully felt like this miraculous thing that I had it felt way, way, way out of reach for me at one point too. Like I know what it feels like to be in that position. And one thing I didn't share about, like, when I decided to listen from that soul seat, you could say, is that I knew that the first step I needed to take before anything was just to listen to the stories of people who had achieved that miracle of healing their body from, like, had miraculous healings, and I do think it's a miracle, actually, and but that's because I define a miracle as not it's not something like taking a pill and then it gets better. A miracle takes work,
Mm,
actually. A miracle takes work. So that's something I really wanna say, a miracle takes work, which doesn't make it any less miraculous and amazing. But I knew that I needed to listen to the stories of people who had undergone and that's why, for example, when I chose to work with a nutritionist, there were several physical things that helped me recover, and one of the main ones was a total overhaul of my microbiome, a complete microbiome reset of 2 years, actually. And part of why I was drawn to work with the nutritionist that I chose was because she also she was one of those amazing miracle stories and had been sick from age 18 to like 30 and bedridden and couldn't even like lift a book. Like she was so weak. And now she's like fully long wait lists and like travels the world and lives with indigenous tribes and is writing research on how to like restore, these amazing things in our bodies based on indigenous wisdom and science, which is a beautiful combination. And I think there's a key in what I just said there about a miracle takes a work. That was part of the mindset that had to go together because I think there was a split for me where I thought like miracles happen passively
Mhm.
and hard work is also just completely fruitless because I'd been working so hard for my whole life. I was definitely one of those like oldest child, straight A, valedictorian type people who was very successful intellectually and all of this stuff. And so it was especially hard for me to have be so disabled I couldn't even vacuum my own house because it was like then I had to ask questions of like, well, where's my worth coming from
Mhm.
if I can't even not only can I not do stuff for other people, I need other people to feed me and I need other people to clean my house and drive me places. And so it really forced me to see the way that I was looking at my worth. And so this is more the identity piece, how I was doing it based on like how I was performing for others. And this kind of sense of giving that was not actually coming from what I would now consider true generosity, but like from a sense of like creating an identity that was worthy of being alive and on the planet
Yeah.
because there was like such a deep trauma around like how delightful it is just to be and be a body and be a woman and be a being on the planet and just like take pleasure in that, you know?
Yeah, because there's a lot that you had said about this miracle takes work that I think people sometimes try to bypass.
Yeah.
The thing is we all need, some kind of miracle, and what I mean by that is that we all have deep lessons that we're meant to live in to unravel in a lifetime that can seem impossible. It seems completely against your nature, and what you were saying about you were brought up to be like the poster child, right? Like, very high achieving and all of that, and, like, when we believe that this is who we are, oftentimes, it's that identity that on the other side of it, like, on the other side of breaking that identity is a huge lesson, and that we're meant to live, and I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but part of life is l to learn the lesson that we are not that.
Yeah.
So, actually, you shared with me something earlier in a previous conversation, and I would love for you to tie this into it, and we're gonna go, like, real deep then. But you talked about how you were born C-section,
Mhm.
right? And then you tied that in with, 1, leaky gut, and then also this not trusting yourself, right? I want can we tie all of those pieces together?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I loved that that was, like, one of the questions on the intake of that nutritionist that I worked with, and she had that understanding, and I learned previously, like, years ago from another film it's interesting that, like, the theme of regeneration has been following me since well before that, and so I don't think that it's an accident, but I still remember, like, it just, like, that moment of catching that film, it was, like, way back in college or something where they were talking about how hospitals had forgotten, or didn't realize, I guess, that it's so important that when a baby passes through the vaginal canal, they're picking up bacteria that they smell and that wipes on their face. And that is what sets their gut microbiome and helps that transition moment from being like nested in the womb, in the plasma, into breathing the air and being in this environment with all this new bacteria, they have to like the vagina is like the bridge of those two worlds that helps the baby like, "Oh, this is what's happening." Orientation, like, yes, mapping, and so, some places that are more, you know, aware of this will actually take a swab in the case of a C-section and take some vaginal juice and put it on the baby's face. But, in my case and a lot of in the last few generations in particular, where C-sections were happening really, like, a lot, like, kind of like the way people get antibiotics way more than they need them to.
Yeah.
So I also developed some kind of stomach infection when I was 11 months old and had to be weaned cold turkey, and they say that I, like, wailed for, like, 5 days and had to be switched to formula. And so you could say part of what that reframed for me as well was a recognition of, oh, this makes sense. Like a lot of medicine people had worked with were like, your situation is so complicated because there's a lot of like something negative, but your body won't just get rid of it. It's like holding onto it. And there's this underlying malnourishment that like I couldn't get to the bottom of. This it was like the root was not actually the poison. The poison was on top of the root, which was this like actually more of a vacuity, a missing, like something that should have been there
Mm.
that wasn't like a probably what would have given me the proper boundaries in my gut, my proper boundaries coming into the world and my first experience in being human. And there's a lot more I could say about that, but you'll have to remind me what the other part of your question was, how this ties into
Not trusting self.
the what not trusting self.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the feeling almost of like from so early in life, you could just imagine, like and the way I've imagined it sometimes is if going through the birth canal was an initiatory experience that teaches you that a miracle is work, and it's not work in the sense that, like, all these things have to come into gear, like these flexing muscles and this, like, bones of the mom's pelvis moving and, like, the direction of the body. Like, it is a miracle because we don't have to control that, like, something greater than us is showing everything where it needs to go and, like, putting the force behind it, right? But it takes work in the sense that, like, one has to be, like, engaged and present and feeling safe. And that's so funny. People often don't think, like, having to work is well, what if safety actually had this inherent kind of work in it that was like, "Yes, I wanna live." Like, "Yes, I want" like, the choice to live, which comes back to that question, which comes back to our will too. How uncool would that be if we were just here as slaves and not as, like, I wanna be here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm choosing life. And so I guess I kinda just thought, because my experience was such that my mom labored for so long and was like, I couldn't, like the story was, like, that I couldn't fit because her pelvis bones were, like, not opening or something. So I was, like, trying, but it was, like, literally a block where I was like, "Hit your head against I can't get through here." So you could play the whole thing out, but, like, there's something in there about, like,
Uh,
how and I tell my clients this all the time is like, something happened in the environment that was not our fault.
yeah.
It was not my fault that my mom's bones wouldn't open, and maybe the reason they wouldn't open was because she was, like, in a cold hospital bed with fluorescent lights and cold fingers and didn't trust the doctor even and then why was the hospital like that? Well, because of the way that we got astray and how we do like, you could trace it back, but, like, something was not safe, and it wasn't my fault that that was the case, but
Yeah.
it made it so that I felt, like, blocked in coming into life, and the only way out was, like, oh, the doctor will just cut me out, and I didn't you know, I got the experience like, oh I mean, this is so funny as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, like, almost like a anticlimactic is the word? I was like, "Well, I
Okay.
made it into life, but, like, ah, really wanted to go, like, through the natural way." So here I am
Well
later being like, "I need the natural way to get through this freaking disease. I'm not going to the doctor."
I think we could actually tie this back in a way to the comment that you said about rewiring your relationship with effort, because one of your earliest experiences as a human was that your effort in a way was challenged.
Yeah, and in a way, it was like I was given 2 options. Either you work really hard and you never make it, or you don't have to work, don't worry, someone will just do it for you.
Mm.
And neither of those is like what a true secure attachment in the world is. is like, I am with you unconditionally at your side, and I know you can do it, and I'm gonna help you muster that deep inner motivation. I'm here for you. I love you unconditionally, and you got this, and I'm gonna you help you work through every obstacle to get that satisfaction of making it through this tunnel and through whatever the challenge is, whether it's a birth canal that's literal or anything in life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Ugh. Okay, so there are so many threads that I wanna pull on so that we can weave. Um, because, yeah, it's all really rich material, and it's just this ability to look at things from this huge perspective and see that it's all connected. So, I wanna bring the conversation to this, like, because you know that I've done research on Ayurveda and autoimmune.
Yeah.
And then this idea, I think, that has come up again and again, talking with patients with autoimmune, and this ties back to also this, like, lack of trust in self, is that there is a disconnection with their self-esteem.
Mhm. Mhm.
That on the micro level is when, like, you don't trust yourself to, uh, do the right thing, or you don't value yourself, and so what the body ends up doing is it stops recognizing self as friend, and it will attack your own cells. Like, there's literally
Yes.
mechanisms, um, in your immune system that are supposed to tell you to differentiate between self and not self, and those go haywire in the case of autoimmune. You had mentioned previously how there in your life, there was kind of like this latent desire that you had to grapple with to not live, and how there was a lot of shame around that.
Yes.
And how, like, you can't pretend to live life. That's what you've told me before. You can't pretend to live like you actually have to.
Yeah.
What was your process for that?
Yeah, well, and thanks for bringing me back there because what I forgot to say with the whole birth experience was that when we're young and we don't know better, our brain's job is to, like, make sense of why something happens, and so even if there's a trauma or something in the environment that's off, we internalize that and we believe it's us. Like, we believe it's my fault that dad left or that mom hit me or that so and so was mean, and we don't necessarily think in the words, "It's my fault," but it's actually safer to stay intact and believe it's your fault than to believe that you were wronged by someone who's your caretaker when you're an innocent child,
Mhm.
which is a pretty big deal. And so the hard work becomes, and this is where falling in love with the rage and the terror comes in, you have to actually stop digesting what's not yours, stop making things your fault. You know, it did to me, the degree to which I was doing that was so unconscious. I think I told you, like, I didn't even realize that a part of me wished I was dead. Like, I
Yeah.
was so ashamed that a part of me would think that I convinced myself that no part of me felt like wished I was dead. Not until I was like in pain and not sleeping and all of these things were happening and I had the thought, "Oh, if I could take a pill right now, I would." The temptation would, before would have been to be like, "Oh my god, no, I don't believe that." Like, shove that down. But from this place of listening from the seat of my soul was like, "Oh my goodness, that's in there.
Mm.
That's in there." And at the time, it was like, I don't think right away I connected it to something that was pre-vaccine. I just thought of it was because of what I was experiencing, but at least that was a starting point because I was like, I believe health is, to be healthy physically in a body while incarnate, I have to want to be here 100%. And so if there's a part of me that doesn't, like, we need to listen to that. And not in a shamey way anymore, but, like, honestly, what information is there here? And what I decided to do was actually what it led to, I was already receiving help, but it led to me just from a place of deserving, which hadn't been there before, like, asking for more help. Like, I need, like, 3 or 4 sessions of help every week of some from some kind of healer and, like, for indefinitely amounts of time, and, like, I will spend I don't care that, about I will use all the money that I have on, things that are going to support me. And I won't feel bad about asking for this and that and all these different things. So there was this like turning around of shame for needing to, oh, I had the thought that a part of me wishes I was dead. That means I need to actually open my field wider to receive more because I'm not receiving enough.
Mm,
Um, which is kind of so wild now that I think about it, because in a way it was like I was actually like softening that rigid boundary, so to speak, that block. I had to be brave and open my field in order to actually attract the supports that were actually gonna make a difference for me. And if I hadn't opened that field, I probably would have died, right? And
yeah,
so as much as it feels like in those moments where we're feeling so terrified, the we what we want to do is harden more. The ironic thing is to open more, but with discernment and compassion, because that opening then also let me eventually have the nourishment I needed, both physically for my body and energetically in my life, to have the strength to purge the rage and the terror and also the physical toxins and heavy metals and dysbiosis, and all of the things that were physically in my tissues too. So it's kind of like in the nervous system work, I really appreciate this differentiation because a lot of people understand the importance of moving things and moving emotions and energy, but they don't recognize that when someone is in freeze, the reason they're not moving those things is not because they're stupid. It's actually because they literally don't have the energy in their cells to move it. And so trying to make them move it is actually just gonna like freak their body out more and the toxins are gonna go deeper in the tissues and the hard emotions are gonna go deeper inside. And so there's this need for almost like going back into the womb and like restitching the birth trauma, right? Like
yeah.
feeling warm and spacious and surrounded and taken care of unconditionally, and then from that place of, like, nourishment and safety, then there's the capacity to, like, get real, like, targeted and be like, "No more you, no more you, like, goodbye," like, do that work.
Do you have a process for people to go back into the womb space?
I mean, one of the first part of the journey I take people through in the sanctuary, we go around the wheel in, like, the stages of a plant, and the first stage is the soil, like, before you even plant the seed, which is really akin to being in the womb. So in nervous system language, it's basically actually the deep work of just regulation, which means, like, able to be like, when I was talking about the boundaries, like, we're able to be in the flow of the present moment and feel safe, basically. We're not holding ourselves back or running forward. I intuitively, I'm often invoking that state in, like, sessions, whether I'm saying it or not, but it's really beautiful now working with a group and having a curriculum for the first time to have that actually be an explicit phase on the journey, and it's the first phase, really. It's going back into the soil, going back into the womb, and remembering that birth rate because we weren't meant to have like, any time that we've had a rupture from that, and I would say even any medicalized birth probably has some fragment where that was, split, and so if we're restitching that fabric, it's like, how can I go back and retrieve that feeling, realize I am worthy of feeling that, like, and actually not only that, but, like, that feeling is meant to was meant to propel me into life and not be interrupted by
Mhm.
trauma. I was meant to, like, carry that feeling forward into each new developmental stage, because each stage, like, buoys the next. It's not supposed to be a severance from the stage that comes before. It's supposed to be like a stepping stone that buoys the next. And so one of the ways that we do that in my sanctuary group is by sometimes it could be like visualizing the being in the soil, but it could also be like being in the womb, or it could also be like being in an ocean of stars. And it's so unique for each person, like what associations will bring them into that felt sense. So that's always unique, but the important thing is that feeling of just being warm and buoyed and like there's nothing that you have to do and you're so loved and protected like infinitely. That feeling.
When I hear you speak, I just realized, like, I think a lot of people do need to visit that, but, like, we're just really unaware of it because this is not something we think to do because we don't even think that we remember, right?
Our nervous system does. Yeah.
I was actually the opposite of you. I came out so fast that I was born in the car. I don't know if I told you that.
Wow, no, you haven't. You're a firecracker.
So, basically, like, they were stuck in traffic, but the hospital wasn't even that far. I'd say it was probably, like, 5, 10 minutes tops to get on a normal day to get to the hospital. And I think there was some traffic because it was rush hour, but yeah, I came out
Wow.
fast.
Yeah, that's interesting too that they're like that's a whole nother one thing I remember from my training in birth and the nervous system and retracing trauma imprints, we had a colleague of mine and a midwife talk about how whatever the circumstances was, you can trace it to just like patterns we have in life. Like for example, like if someone had like a got twisted around, like they're getting in situations where they feel twisted around, or if someone was like,
Hmm.
if someone was delayed, like they feel delayed, and or like if someone was fat, like there might be a feeling of like you have to like you're ready to burst before the thing is there for you to like catch you.
Yeah.
It's like so wild how whatever that was, imprint follows us through life.
I think it's something definitely to, like, just meditate on a little bit more because I don't really know off the top of my head exactly, like, what that means for me, except that I
Yeah.
know, there are certain things that I know about myself when it comes to effort,
Mhm.
actually, that perhaps are connected.
Yeah. Well, and the beautiful thing, with the neuroplasticity and the message of neuroplasticity and the quantum and rehoming yourself and soul retrieval and all of that is that it's all plastic and changeable. And I think that knowing that gives the safety to go into these hard places that are like that can like start to put the body into a state of like, oh my God, like I don't want to go there because it's scary. But when you have a certain sense of grounding and when you've re-achieved that feeling of unconditional love and protection, you can then safely like revisit like a lot of those journeys that I took in healing myself, were very Jungian, meeting demons and meeting like weird things and like having encounters to transmute them, but it was all very safe. I knew that I was doing it from the seat of this alchemist, this witness, this like transmutive force that you're free to be curious about things if you know that you're not defined by them, right? Which is part of retrieving the self-worth and the self-sovereignty and the boundaries is that you don't feel pulled around anymore by things. You realize that you can communicate with them. You can talk to your demons. You can talk to your inflammation. You can talk to your liver, have relationship with things that were previously really painful or scary to you. And you can be like, huh, what do I need to do to repair this relationship? Just like we would repair relationships with other people in our life, like repairing with our inner parts and repairing with our organs and the parts of our body ecosystem. So this is like deep repair work. And it could be very empowering. And I just love how knowing that we can do that, it takes away a lot of the fear of like looking at the really challenging things and because you know that you can rewrite it, right? It becomes safe to see like, "Oh, wow, that was really a not great birth experience, but look at what it's done for me now." Like, now I help people go through birth canals in their life, and I feel like a midwife that it's like, I know exactly the ingredients you need to feel like that miracle and that effort are integrated, you know?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so since we're kind of rounding about our time, I want to tie a couple more ideas to finish this off. One is that you talked previously about embracing the healthy rebel.
Mhm.
And that has to do with, like, feeling really alive. And then I wanna integrate that into the question of what is your future vision, because having been able to transmute this traumatic experience multiple times and knowing that you have agency, you have choice, and that your effort does matter, what is the future vision that you have now for yourself that you didn't allow yourself to have before?
Mm, yeah. Okay. So I'll answer the first question first about the healthy rebel. And it's so interesting, and I remember, like, when that nutritionist I talk about, she talked about going to these tribes where they're still living pre-colonially, like, there are a few places in the world where people still have not been influenced by modernization, and for them, there's nothing rebellious about living fully in a way that is in sync with nature, nature's rhythms and codes, and their primordial wildness, right? Like, it's just who they are. But the reality is, you know, and this comes to the piece about not internalizing the trauma, but being really aware that, like, the environment has lost. I use the term soul loss to talk about trauma as well. You could also talk about it as, like, the loss of rhythm with nature, the loss of our wildness, the loss of our primality, our primal nature. And the loss of that primal nature has created systems that behave in ways that are essentially traumatic, like ways that don't make sense to the body or the nervous system, which is still tuned to nature's ways. And so when one starts to wake up out of freeze and come out of numbness and come alive and come into their healthy vitality in their body, one starts to feel kind of like you're waking up in a little bit of a dystopian reality a little bit. Like, there's a lot of beauty at the same time, like the beauty of the natural world and of your life and your body. Like, now when I go into a store with, like, fluorescent lights and, like, lots of plastic packages, it feels so weird. I wanna get out of there as soon as possible because I'm like
I get
like I'm
that.
like, "This is like nature would think of this as like a fungus that's, like, hidden in the dark that needs to get aired out, just coming into this building. Like, what is this?" The whole thing about being a rebel is just that, not like, "Yeah, I wanna be a rebel." I never wanted to be a rebel. I was like the shy girl who was, like, terrified of rocking the boat, but I can't not be, because when you're choosing to wake up and be in your primordial nature and be wild again and be embodied and be sovereign and have your healthy boundaries intact and all of this, you automatically start to look different than a lot of culture. And so that's all I mean by being, it's like it kind of puts you in a position of being a rebel,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah, my vision for the future, there's a lot of it that is personal and there's a lot of it that's impersonal, and I think they blend together beautifully because healing some of the deep safety and relationship attachment patterns, like, there's a real longing for me to start a family and have a child while I'm still able to, and to have every area of my life reflect this regeneration that I've been doing in my body from the ground up. So the way that I've rebuilt my own tissues, I'd like to have enough of, like, the heavy metals cleared, and like I want to have a body that's like, yeah, I want to have a baby. I can handle that. And I also want to, find a partner who is in this, like, healthy, not, this healthy, wild, rebelling. What's the verb of that? Like, rebellion in the world, simply by, like, thriving and loving. So it's a combination of loving life and also stewarding what real, like, regenerative wildlife is meant to look like. So creating oases where that's happening. For
Mm.
me, I really envision it like building a sanctuary on an actual piece of land and a homestead where the soil is being rebuilt, where people can come and learn about regeneration of their bodies or of their lives or the things that I'm doing online now. But that just reflects, and I'm probably lots of things that I can't foresee, but that will just be surprises. Like, now I see my life as fertilizer for the regenerative paradigm,
Mhm.
basically, on the earth. So whatever shapes that takes, and I just know too that because this is the way that I've seen it works, like the universe wants my personal healing, uh, in the same way that it wants my like service to the world. And those two things, I just trust that they'll continue to weave. It feels like flowering, I guess, today. You can be a rebel just blooming and
Yeah.
being like so stoked to be a force of life?
Yeah. To just
Yeah.
embrace life and, like, actually enjoy it and be present.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually rebellious
Yeah.
in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one more question because I said I would have you cover it. It's just very simple. What is soul retrieval?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in many ways we've been talking about it already. Bringing home to yourself the ways that parts of your true self were lost due to trauma. And it really transcends, I think. It also points to the fact that um, the more like dystopic our world has become, it's, you could say, a loss of its awareness of its own sacredness,
Hmm.
you know? And so, soul to me, there, you could talk about soul as actually being the part of ourselves that continues after death, but you could also talk about soul as being the animating force in life. Like, it's what makes something alive? And so retrieving the soul of a thing is also akin to retrieving its choice for life. And it's also worthiness of self.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for being with me today and
Yeah.
for spreading your wisdom with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, Valerie.
Thank you.
Soar to the sky.
Thanks for tuning in to From the Ashes. If this episode sparked something in you, I want you to know your evolution matters and we're rooting for you all the way. For coaching, community, and resources to help you rise into your full potential, visit intrepidwellness.life and check out what we have to offer. If you love the episode, please leave a comment, share it with a friend, or tag me on Instagram at intrepidwellness.val because I'd love to hear what resonated for you. Until next time, keep rising.